Someone that's clearly the financial benefactor to Jeffrey Epstein and has not been contacted or interviewed by the FBI or the DOJ? What the hell is going on?
I want the survivors and anyone who is struggling right now to know that we see you, we feel you, and we are fighting for you.
This is Today as It Happened. Good Wednesday evening to you. I'm Holly Furfer, here with your chronological look at the biggest events and stories of the day. From lawmakers' deposition of businessman Les Wexner over his longtime friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, to Mark Zuckerberg testifying in a California social media trial. But first, this morning, our international correspondent on the ground in Kyiv gave us a look at the Russia-Ukraine war's human cost amid peace talks in Geneva. 2 hours. That's how long today's Russia-Ukraine peace talks lasted. No deal. Meanwhile, the UN reports 2,500 Ukrainians were killed last year. That's the deadliest toll since 2022. Scripps News senior international correspondent Jason Bellini is in Kyiv with an exclusive first look at a potent new symbol of war's human cost.
Holly, in the coming days, world leaders are going to be arriving in Kyiv by train for the 4th anniversary of the full-scale invasion by Russia. And what they're going to be greeted by is this passenger car right here that about a month ago was destroyed. People burned to death by a Russian drone.
The head of Ukraine's passenger railway service gave Scripps News exclusive access to ride with him on the final leg of this car's journey to Kyiv from where it was hit, near Barvinko, the closest station to the front lines. 18 people in the carriage, 6 of them killed. Ukrainian officials say Russia used Starlink on the Shaheds targeting the moving train. Soon thereafter, Musk pulled the plug at the request of Ukraine's new defense minister, SpaceX blocking thousands of unauthorized Russian Starlink terminals.
Was it difficult to bring this here?
Yeah, as you can see, it's now bound together by the metal so that it doesn't fall apart on the way. Unfortunately, it's beyond repair, and it's every time it's pain to see because we lack the train cars here in Ukraine. Right now, every train car is golden.
And every life is golden, too.
Sure.
6 people died in this train car.
6 people died, and there might have been more if not for the fast direction of the train attendant.
4 years later, this war is still a train barreling forward, and Kyiv wants the world to know what's left on the tracks. Holly?
Our senior international correspondent Jason Bellini in Kyiv for us. Thank you, Jason. The Vatican is declining to join President Trump's new Board of Peace. The Pope's top diplomat says the Holy See is perplexed by parts of the plan. The board was originally designed to oversee Gaza reconstruction, but has expanded to become a global peacekeeping body. Cardinal Pietro Parolin says the United Nations should handle crisis situations instead.
It is our preference, and it is our hope to do this together with you, our friends here in Europe. For the United States and Europe, we belong together.
A much different tone this year in Munich from the U.S. representative as Secretary of State Marco Rubio addresses the security conference, and that helped ease some of the tensions between the U.S. and the country's European allies. Joining us now is State Department Principal Deputy Spokesperson Tommy Pigott. Tommy, thank you for joining us again today. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me on.
So Secretary Rubio, he got a warm reception, a standing ovation after his 30-minute speech. It was quite the contrast from the reaction Vice President Vance got last year when he spoke to the Munich Security Conference. So has the administration's message changed?
No, the message, I think, has been very clear. It's a message about revitalization. It's a message about racing boldly into the future to face the challenges that we all face. It's also a frank conversation about many of the policies that have been adopted by countries in the West that have hurt us, such as policies that encourage mass migration, anti-energy policies. Under the Trump administration, we've been very clear that the era of mass migration has come to an end, that we're going to unleash American energy, which helps the environment, helps our economies, helps national security. So it's a conversation about the challenges that we face, a conversation about the missteps that we've taken, but also a call to move forward and address these challenges boldly with new ideas, with revitalization to unlock our ingenuity and face these challenges together.
And Tommy, as conversations continue in all parts and regions of the world, the talks with Iran in Geneva ended with an agreement on setting a set of guiding principles. Can you explain what those principles are, and what is the reality that they bring us any closer to a breakthrough in negotiations?
Well, look, we've seen these talks happening. Fundamentally, this is a dynamic situation. I don't want to preview where these go, but the president's been very clear. He wants to see the Iranian regime make a deal. He's also been very clear about what our concerns are. That's been no secret here from this administration, a maximum pressure policy from the beginning of this administration to deny the regime there the revenues they need to continue their malign activities. Malign activities such as a nuclear weapons program, and we saw Operation Midnight Hammer. Malign activities such as funding their terrorist proxies, ballistic missiles. So these conversations are ongoing. We'll see where they go. But the message from this administration has been very clear, and no one can question that President Trump means what he says.
Along those lines, Secretary Rubio said it is hard to make a deal with Iran because they make decisions based on pure theology. That's in his words. Is regime change really the only answer, or does President Trump really think he could trust the current regime to honor any deal in good faith going forward?
Well, look, what I can say is looking back to the previous time the Iranian regime rejected a deal, and we saw Operation Midnight Hammer. President Trump means what he says. He has shown that here. And again, he's been very clear about what we need to see in terms of what a deal would look like. He wants to see a deal. He's also been very clear about the malign activities he wants to see come to an end.
Is a return to the framework of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, basically the one limiting Iran's nuclear activities in exchange for relief from international sanction, is that still the goal? Or is the U.S. perhaps pursuing a different approach? Because there may be concerns that sanctions relief could empower destabilizing regional behavior if this regime actually stays in place.
Well, look, again, the JCPOA would have been ended at this point in terms of the 10-year horizon. The president's been very clear about the malign activities he needs to see come to an end. The nuclear program, the ballistic missile program, the funding of terrorist proxies. And the president has taken clear action previously in order to stop the Iranian regime to get to these, fund these malign activities, for example. And we've seen a maximum pressure policy that continues. The president, again, wants to see a deal. He wants to see a deal. But fundamentally, the president has taken actions to make sure that our interests are defended. And no one can doubt, as I've said, that the president means what he says.
Is there a deadline for the administration? We know that there has been a military buildup in that area. Is there a point when he says enough is enough? You're not entering these negotiations in good faith?
Well, look, that's up to the president. I'm not going to get ahead of the president. As the secretary's described, the force posture we see is a force posture necessary to defend our interests in the region. And we have many U.S. soldiers in the region. We have many allies in the region. It's a force posture that reflects that. So in terms of a timeline or deadline, I'm not going to get ahead of the president. That's up to him. The president, again, has been clear he wants to see a deal, and that's been a consistent message from this president.
Let me ask you about Cuba. Has there been any conversations between the U.S. and Cuba and where that stands? We know after Maduro was ousted from Venezuela, Cuba was directly affected. So has President Trump had any conversations, or even Secretary Rubio, in next steps for Cuba? Because we know they're not in a great situation right now.
Well, as President Trump has said, Secretary Marco Rubio is engaged in talks on this. And there is no doubt that we saw a relationship between the illegitimate Maduro regime in Venezuela and the regime in Cuba. And the fact that the actions that we saw in terms of bringing an indicted narco-terrorist to justice in Nicolas Maduro, the regime in Cuba lost an ally there. So, of course, we're seeing, as President Trump has said, these conversations happening. He wants to see the Cuban regime make a deal. He also stressed the humanitarian nature of this. And part of that, which is important, is that the State Department is working to deliver aid directly to the people of Cuba, a regime that is failing under its own volition, under its own incompetence, under its own policies. We are working outside of the regime, not with the regime, to get aid directly to the people of Cuba who need it. So the president has spoken to this, and we'll see where this goes.
All right, I want to turn down to tomorrow's inaugural meeting of the Board of Peace. Can you preview that for us? What do we expect to see?
Well, it really is a historic moment, as the president has described. You're seeing an unprecedented board coming together that was only possible because of President Trump's leadership. Of course, coming out of a ceasefire that, again, only happened because the global coalition that President Trump was able to put together, the aid that we've been able to see enter Gaza without it being eluded by Hamas, the fact that we've seen the hostages be released, all of these things, the progress that we've made only because of President Trump's leadership, and we're having increased momentum here in order to try to bring about and implement this phase 2. That's the focus, implementing the president's comprehensive peace plan. The president has delivered more than anyone thought possible, and this is a further step in that effort.
Tommy Pigott, thank you so much for joining us again. We hope you'll come back as progress is made. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
Coming up on Today as It Happened.
I'm Joe St. George in Washington. Data centers are quickly becoming a major political issue, from your local city council to the halls of Congress. What might President Trump say next week in his State of the Union on this big issue? We go in depth next.
Welcome back to Today as It Happened. All right, let's check back in on our daily briefing of the day's top stories. The trial for the father of a Georgia school shooter enters day 3 for his alleged role in the deadly Appalachia High School shooting. Colin Gray faces 29 charges, including murder, after giving his 14-year-old son the assault-style weapon as a Christmas gift. Prosecutors say Gray knew his son's mental health had deteriorated and that he was obsessed with school shooters. The September shooting killed 4 people. Tuesday's testimony was from high school students caught up in the attack. His defense attorney did not cross-examine any of the victims. More students will testify in the coming days. New research shows artificial intelligence is starting to impact the job market, but only for younger workers. Stanford University researchers found workers ages 22 to 25 in AI-exposed jobs have seen a 13% decline in employment since 2022. The biggest impact is on jobs like customer service representatives and administrative assistants. Kevin Hassett, the director of the National Economic Council, addressed this issue outside the White House on Wednesday.
If you're a kid who spent a lot of time studying computer programming, then there's probably an AI agent that's just as good as you right now. And that's a very difficult and disappointing place to be. And so it's been somewhat difficult for recent college grads to get jobs.
They are being built all over the country, from Kansas City to Metro Detroit, data centers. And as the Scripps News Group has reported, oftentimes when new projects are proposed, those who live nearby have questions, and in some cases concerns that Washington is beginning to notice. They are hard to miss when they get built in your community, generating plenty of debate from those who live nearby.
I don't know that this facility will necessarily benefit me in any way.
Am I going to hear this hum all hours of the evening and night?
Do we have any idea what we're inviting here?
Data center concerns often involve property values, water needs, and electricity impacts. What's driving the data center boom and debate? Demand. Artificial intelligence is being used more often, but AI requires more servers and data centers to operate, and in turn more electricity. Bloomberg News analysis recently found utility costs have gone up 267% over a 5-year period in areas near data centers. Currently, there are over 4,100 active data centers in the United States.
Data centers in a community are a huge net benefit for a community.
Adam Kramer from Panattoni Development recently told Scripps News Detroit about the benefits of data centers, like high-paying construction jobs and how new tax dollars for local communities can be generated safely. But Washington is beginning to grow concerned about the impact data centers may be having on utility bills. It's prompted progressive Senator Bernie Sanders to call for a nationwide moratorium on building new data centers. Republican Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri and Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut have introduced a bipartisan bill to require data centers to have their own power sources.
They should not be taking electricity or water or any other utility from honest, hard-working ratepayers.
The White House, meanwhile, is slowly rolling out new data center policies, too. On Truth Social last month, President Trump said, "I never want Americans to pay higher electricity bills because of data centers," with White House advisors signaling in recent days that the Trump administration wants technology companies to pick up more of the costs. This topic is one likely to be brought up in President Trump's State of the Union address next week. New polling from Politico recently found 37% of respondents support new data centers in their community. 28% are opposed. 28% have yet to form an opinion. Joe St. George, Scripps News Group, Washington.
Up next on Today As It Happened.
A 2-month-old baby boy detained at a for-profit immigration detention center is rushed to the hospital with difficulty breathing. I'm Scripps News investigative reporter Patrick Terpstra. Coming up, what we know about this case and how the little baby is doing now.
And later,
let me tell you, the survivors have said over and over and over, follow the money. That was the one thing that they told us, as well as their attorneys, follow the money. Well, we're following the money. But I'm going to be perfectly honest with you and tell you that we are running into dead ends at this moment.
So glad you're back with Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer, here with your daily rundown of today's top stories.
Democrats may be sweeping the recent elections, but a new poll shows there could be trouble in paradise. It seems the party has an image problem. An AP and ORC poll finding Democrats' favorability among their own voters hasn't recovered since Donald Trump won in 2024. The party's approval rating plummeted after that election and is still low. The lack of enthusiasm doesn't guarantee electoral losses, but it could be a long-term problem for the Democrats. UN Security Council rushing to hold a meeting on the Gaza ceasefire before President Trump's new Board of Peace convenes on Thursday. The UN moved up their meeting after Trump announced his board would meet the same day. The scheduling conflict highlights potential competition between the UN and Trump's new global peacekeeping initiative. Some countries worry the board may try to rival the UN Security Council, the Vatican now among them. More now on a Scripps News investigation. It involves a for-profit family immigration detention center that's back in the news again. Word today of a baby boy being rushed to the hospital. All of this happening at the Dilley Detention Center near San Antonio, Texas. It is a place where hundreds of children are held with their parents who have been arrested by ICE. Scripps News investigative reporter Patrick Terpstra is live in our newsroom. And Patrick, what can you tell us about this case involving a 2-month-old boy?
Yeah, a really alarming report here, Dell, about this 2-month-old baby boy. He was held at the Dilley Family Detention Center along with his parents and a baby sister. They'd been there 3 weeks when the 2-month-old fell ill. According to Congressman Joaquin, Castro, Democrat of Texas, this little boy named Juan Nicolas began suffering from respiratory distress as well as vomiting, and at one point this week became unresponsive. The family tried to go to the clinic on the detention center campus, but because it was the very early morning hours, there was not actually a doctor present. This is another one of those cases where an ambulance had to be called to take this little boy to a hospital. The good news here is that that hospital was able to treat and release the baby boy. And then at that point, he was sent back to the Dilley complex. All of this really just happening yesterday. And at that point, the courts got involved and they went in front of an immigration judge that detained them further, but said that they should actually be deported. It was that ruling that sealed their fate. They were back then yet again at the detention center and they were deported by ICE. This is the same place, by the way, that little 5-year-old Liam Ramos was held, the little boy seen in the blue bunny hat from Minneapolis. But that story ended differently. That boy was able to be released with his family and sent back to Minneapolis. This little 2-month-old was sent to Mexico with his family and just the $190 that they had from the commissary. The Congressman Joaquin Castro involved in this has been very vocal, pointing to this as he says yet another example of how these detention centers are no place for children.
We've seen the violence of ICE on the street, but there's also a brutality of ICE behind closed walls in those prisons that everybody doesn't get to see, that only members of Congress and others have had a chance to see. And so I'm telling you, please, it's just as bad in there in a different way. Please speak up.
And DHS has been responding to various posts on social media with their own posts that really point at the mother, saying that she is to blame for this ordeal. Here's one of those posts. Quote, "The mother chose to take her child into custody with her. The mother chose to enter and remain in the country illegally. The mother chose not to take $2,600 and a free flight home." $2,600, that's how much DHS says people will get if they, quote, self-deport, if they decide to leave the country on their own. If they're in the country and they are unauthorized, they can do so using that app. So clearly a lot of the messaging coming from DHS is still about this idea of self-deportation and not ending up in detention, but that applies to so many folks. We know some of them are not technically in the country illegally. They actually came seeking asylum. So still trying to find out more information about exactly what the case was with this family. But as of right now, they are back in Mexico, Del.
Fascinating. The congressman referred to the detention center as a prison. Patrick, the Trump administration says they're trying to keep children with their parents, but what is the alternative?
And that really is the debate because, of course, we saw before the family separation policy where kids were kept separately from their parents. Right now, the rule is, according to the Trump administration, parents who get arrested by ICE can decide if they want their kids to come with them. But that does mean being detained in a detention center. Advocates for these migrants, as well as their attorneys, say that what should be happening is, in their view, these kids should be released with their parents back into their homes in the communities and then monitored by ICE with ankle bracelets or other things to make sure that they still go to their court appearances. Ultimately, they may still end up deported, but they wouldn't be spending time in these detention centers still.
Scripps News investigative correspondent Patrick Terpstra. Patrick, as always, thank you.
Coming up on Today As It Happened.
He, according to him, has not been was questioned by the FBI or the DOJ about Mr. Epstein. How outrageous is that?
You're watching Today As It Happened. This is Scripps News rundown of the biggest events and stories that happened during the day. So let's jump right in.
We've done something that the Department of Justice has failed to do. We have actually sat down and listened, not once, not twice, but on multiple occasions to the survivors. As you saw last week, AG Bondi wouldn't even turn and look at the survivors, let alone allow her DOJ to do their job, which is to investigate. So here we are as the legislative branch doing our jobs and trying to do oversight. Let me tell you, the survivors have said over and over and over, follow the money. That was the one thing that they told us, as well as their attorneys, follow the money. Well, we're following the money, but I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you and tell you that we are running into dead ends at this moment. On yesterday, I was asked about this particular deposition and what I anticipated I would hear. As a trained attorney and litigator, once they told me he wasn't taking the fifth, I thought that the record would be full of I don't remembers. I will tell you that once this record comes out, you will see that you most likely will be left with more questions than answers. It is almost inconceivable to be missing the amounts of money that are missing. And somehow, Mr. Wexner have no idea.
Democrats saying today, without Lex Wexner, there would be no Jeffrey Epstein. The man who was supposedly #1 on Epstein's speed dial list is being questioned at this hour by the House Oversight Committee inside his home in Ohio this morning. Wexner is the billionaire founder of Bath & Body Works and the former CEO of Victoria's Secret. The Justice Department describing Wexner, though, as a co-conspirator in the Epstein files. That disclosure not made public until pressure from Republican Congressman Thomas Massie. Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller joins us now live from New York. And Alex, during a break from questioning, lawmakers held a press briefing. What did they say?
Well, Del, this is questioning happening by the House Oversight Committee, who is investigating the Department of Justice's handling of these files, but only Democratic members of Congress were present. There were Republican staffers there, but no Republican members of Congress made their way to Wexner's estate in Ohio. Now, they say they have more questions than answers after speaking to him for roughly 2 hours this morning, saying that Wexner is continuing to distance himself from Jeffrey Epstein, despite the fact that we know that they worked together for quite a long time. He says that the top Democrat on the committee, Robert Garcia, says that he has questions about where this money went, that essentially money was transferred to Epstein, and now Wexner is saying that he doesn't know what happened to it. Listen to what else he had to say, particularly relating to the fact that Garcia says they're doing more work than the Attorney General.
It's been clear to us, at least the way Mr. Wexner has presented this, that he, according to him, has not been was questioned by the FBI or the DOJ about Mr. Epstein. How outrageous is that? He's someone that's been named by survivors, someone that's in the files more than most people, someone that's clearly the financial benefactor to Jeffrey Epstein and has not been contacted or interviewed by the FBI or the DOJ? Yeah. What the hell is going on?
And Garcia says Wexner has said that he traveled to different properties, including Epstein's Island, as well as other properties all around the nation, and only spent a very short amount of time there, according to Wexner. But he said he also has questions about the survivors who have said that they have been to the very estate that they are at today to question Wexner, that there is one survivor who said that she was assaulted there and was not allowed to leave.
Alex, you have read every DOJ file where Wexner is mentioned. Level set for us. What really was the relationship between Wexner and Epstein?
Well, Del, their relationship goes back to the 1980s when Wexner hired Epstein to manage his money. And it has been said many times over in the files and otherwise that Epstein would not be the wealthy man that he is without Wexner. Now, Epstein never revealed his clients except for Wexner. They had worked together. They apparently stopped speaking, according to Wexner, in 2007, but there's details that show that they spoke in 2008 after Epstein's conviction, and there's emails where Epstein is discussing Wexner as recently as 2017. Now, remember, Wexner worked as the CEO for Victoria's Secret, which was obviously something that Epstein was interested in. Now, there is a crisis intake form that I found where a redacted survivor stated that often Wexner would have models who could not have been over the age of 18 years old do private viewings for him and for Epstein. She also said that models would be wearing swimsuits and some were in lingerie. And then there was a point where Wexner's bodyguard was interviewed by investigators. His name is Adrian, and he stated that he had been to Epstein's Palm Beach home and noted that there were young girls there, but he assumed they were family. He was told by another bodyguard to keep to yourself and to not ask questions, but he had information, he says, that could help the investigation and could fill in the blanks. Again, according to Wexner, he has not spoken to Epstein since 2007, but there are emails that contradict this.
Alex, have survivors come forward linking themselves, though, to abuse by Wexner directly?
Yeah, it's not just that members of Congress believe that Wexner could be helpful in painting a picture about Epstein. It's that they have concerns that Epstein is one of the perpetrators. There are allegations in the files on the DOJ website made by survivors. There's one survivor who reached out directly to the DOJ, incredibly frustrated in her email. She writes that she is an Epstein Maxwell Wexner survivor, and that she is frustrated that she has not been contacted by the Department of Justice. She said she reported everything in 1996 and wants to know why she has been treated so poorly by the organization, meaning the FBI. She says, this is merely my first question. I have many. Now, there's another survivor who apparently talked about her abuse with a reporter. This is an email from a reporter in the UK who sent Jeffrey Epstein a long list of questions that includes the fact that Virginia Giuffre says that she was required to have sex with many men, including Les Wexner. Now, what's interesting about this email, Del, is that who is looking at it grows. First, it is between Epstein and an attorney, trying to figure out how they're going to respond to these questions from a reporter. Then Ghislaine Maxwell is added to this. And then the Duke, Prince Andrew is also added to this email. His email is redacted, but his title in there is the Duke, and he makes a point to say, make sure however you respond, you say, I'm not involved. I cannot handle any more of this on my end. So there's a lot of conversation happening about not only Wexner with these survivors, but with other men as well.
The common thread, though, seems to be that the survivors ask questions, but the FBI does not. Alex Miller, thank you very much for your excellent reporting as we continue to track what is in the Epstein files. Alex, thank you very much.
Up next on Today As It Happened.
To anybody who believes that the Ayatollah can withstand all of this and stay in power and not affect the United States, you're wrong.
Glad you're back with Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. All right, why don't we jump right back into the rundown of our day's top stories.
Developments today in that rescue mission for those missing skiers caught in an avalanche in Northern California. Earlier this hour, officials say 8 of the 9 missing skiers have now been found dead. They say they've notified the family of the remaining person that this is now a recovery effort. Yesterday, the 15-person tour group was buried alive after that powerful storm ripped through the state. 6 people were located and rescued, 2 of them sent to the hospital. Indirect talks between the U.S. and Iran and Switzerland ending on Tuesday with an agreement and a set of guiding principles. The 3-hour talks in Geneva were described as more constructive than earlier negotiations. Iran's foreign minister saying both sides agreed to exchange drafts of a potential deal.
We are hopeful that negotiation will lead to a sustainable and negotiated solution which can serve the interest of relevant parties and the broader region. At the same time, as demonstrated during the aggression of 13 June 2025, Iran remains fully prepared to defend itself against any threat or act of aggression. The consequences of any attack against Iran will not be confined to its borders.
A U.S. official saying the Iranians will provide more detailed proposals in the next 2 weeks to address the gaps between the two countries. And staying with Iran, one of President Trump's most loyal allies is hopping mad. Senator Lindsey Graham was seen cursing up a storm during a meeting with the Danish delegation this weekend. Sources telling Scripps News that Graham is, quote, clearly frustrated about Greenland, but also about his unrealized pushes for the president to take military action against Iran. Also upset about that Russian sanctions bill that still sits in the Senate. Scripps News senior congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed joins us now. He's been working his sources trying to find out more about Graham's outburst. What did you find out?
What's interesting about this whole situation, Del, is this was on the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference, and this was a meeting between Danish officials, the Prime Minister of both Denmark and Greenland and others, and U.S. senators, a bipartisan delegation, in some ways to try and smooth over tensions. Now, what happened here was Senator Graham, I was told by a source in that room, it seemed like he'd had a drink. He then launched into this expletive-laden tirade, mostly directed, again, at least it sounds like, at Greenland, the question of whether the U.S. should own Greenland. He was, kind of making clear there his frustration with the situation. That has been previously reported. What's not previously reported is the source in the room telling me, in fact, multiple sources familiar with what happened in the room, telling me that the real frustration they sensed was not necessarily over Greenland, but rather over Russia and Iran. Those are the 2 areas that Senator Graham has been repeatedly pushing the Trump administration to take action with. Now, Senator Graham introducing that introducing the sanctions bill on Russia about a year ago now. He's been pushing for that in the Senate. He's repeatedly said things like it's not ready yet, or, kind of walked back whether it's ready for a vote. At the same time, we now understand that, he has been, telling allies that this is coming. There's the question of when it's coming, and it seemed like his frustration during this meeting with Denmark was not, again, necessarily over Greenland, but rather over these unrealized pushes, and the frustration somewhat with the White House and with President Donald Trump. The fact that they have not taken action. Now, Senator Graham, he's a hawk. He's repeatedly pushed for military action in Iran as well. He had reportedly told people in that room that it was time to seal Putin's fate, seal the Ayatollah's fate. At the same time, the president has, kind of taken a bit of a slower approach. We've talked about these reports of moving assets that have been reported in other outlets, moving assets overseas to be closer to the Middle East. We've talked about the repeated negotiations between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin and his envoys. At the same time, not a whole lot of concrete action has been taken. We understand that frustration from Senator Graham was over that lack of concrete action. Now, worth noting, I did reach out to a spokesperson for Senator Graham. They told me the assertion the senator was expressing frustration with President Trump was categorically false, but they also declined to comment on his other behavior during that meeting, the expletive-laden tirade that I mentioned, words that are not safe here for television. I do want to mention, though, this was not the first time or only time that Senator Graham mentioned Greenland. He was also in a Politico panel, televised panel, where he specifically said who gives an expletive about who owns Greenland. He said that again in that televised panel over the weekend. Again, a lot of questions just about this frustration he has with the administration. He's frequently thought of as someone with the close ear of President Donald Trump. The fact that Trump is not moving on those two areas appears to be, at least from what I heard, the source of his frustration. And furthermore, a U.S. senator familiar with, meetings with Senator Graham and has met with him before, says that this is not the first time that Graham behind the scenes has expressed frustration, again, with the Trump administration not taking action on Russia's sanctions and, of course, on Iran, striking Iran.
That has been one of the most enduring mysteries of Washington, D.C., why the president is not more aggressive with regards to Russia. It's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, there are more than 80 senators who have co-signed on this legislation that Graham is so upset about the sanctions package for Russia because they want the White House to be more aggressive with regards to Vladimir Putin and less aggressive with regards to Ukraine.
Well, the number was, last I checked, well over 50, but there's a lot of questions, again, about when it's coming up for a vote. I just checked in the last couple of moments with a spokesperson for the Senate, Majority Leader John Thune. He told me that the promise to Graham, which Graham actually reiterated in a statement this past weekend, was that the Russian sanctions bill will come up in the Senate once it has the votes. I mean, this is just the latest step in a long saga of the question of when this bill to enact these punishing sanctions on Vladimir Putin and Russia will actually come up for a vote. Again, we've seen this question of this carrot and stick approach with President Donald Trump. He, of course, met with Putin over the summer. It seemed like things were going the diplomatic route, and then he's kind of come back to the table with Russian sanctions, both endorsing it on Truth Social and also appearing to hold out for something else. At this point, it does sound like a Russian sanctions bill could move forward. But the reality is Graham has been touting this thing with a bipartisan group of co-sponsors for almost a year now. Right. And the question of when it's going to pass, that remains an open one. This frustration with the administration over the lack of progress here, over the lack of either pushing military intervention in Iran or pushing this Russian sanctions bill, that is what we have that is now new.
And as we begin, we said that he is one of the staunchest allies of President Trump. Scripps News senior congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed. Nate, thank you very much.
We'll be right back to continue our look at today's top stories.
We've got to walk. Excuse us. Thank you. We've got to walk.
You're watching Scripps News.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. This is Scripps News Debrief of our top stories of the day. So let's get to it.
Is social media addictive? Depending on who you are, you might say yes or you might say no. But that's the question that is front and center inside the Los Angeles courtroom today. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg, being grilled today by lawyers, asked whether Meta's platforms, Instagram, Facebook, intentionally making them addictive to young people and then causing harm. Zuckerberg refused to say directly whether he thinks that is the case. The trial was brought by a 20-year-old plaintiff known as KGM. She says she used Instagram when she was young, became addicted, even suicidal. Other defendants are Google's YouTube, TikTok, and Snap have already settled. Dr. Daniel Bober is a child psychiatrist and addiction medicine physician. Doctor, thanks for being with us. What is the threshold, the burden to prove what is being alleged actually happened?
Well, listen, I think that's more of a legal question, but I think the problem is that the field itself is pretty unsettled about this. There are some that feel that social media directly causes harm through things like social comparison by idealized images, displaced activities like lack of sleep, lack of face-to-face interactions, cyberbullying, anxiety due to FOMO or fear of missing out. But then there are some that say that social media is bad for people who are particularly vulnerable, or social selection theory, those who are seeking connection because they feel lonely, trying to escape psychic pain, and who have heightened sensitivity to things like body image and have low self-esteem. So I think it's unsettled in the field whether social media actually causes mental illness, but I think at the end of the day, what we're looking at is a bi-directional relationship, meaning that people who use it excessively probably do suffer some mental health harm, and that those who already have pre-existing mental illness are particularly vulnerable to its effects. But I do think there is a comparison here with the tobacco industry, because social media does have certain aspects of addiction that you would find in substances like cocaine, like tolerance, like withdrawal, a functional impairment. But then there are some people that say that what the actual withdrawal is that FOMO, or that anxiety over missing out on things. So I think it's not really settled in the field, but what I can say pretty firmly is that excessive social media use is definitely a red flag for mental illness.
Dr. Brober, much of what we found out when the United States, for instance, did take on big tobacco is much of the damaging info has to come from inside the company. And if that is the case, is there, and I hate to use the phrase, a so-called smoking gun?
Well, certainly there have been Meta employees that have talked about the fact that they were targeting young people. I think it's pretty clear that there are digital algorithms that are in place to get kids to use it excessively, to engage them using variable reinforcement schedules, which is essentially a digital slot machine. So I think there's definitely a role that the social media companies play in this, and they have a vested interest to do so for their own financial gain.
I'm curious, based on your scientific research, what do you say to parents that say that this is simply a case of parents not telling their children to put the phone down?
So there is something to that, right? Because parents aren't using the parental controls, up to 70% of them. And parents themselves aren't always modeling the best behavior. You know, they're at the dinner table on their phones themselves, doing the infinite doom scrolling, hitting the likes, and their kids are witnessing this behavior and they are modeling it. So I think parents have to do a better job at policing their kids, at getting involved, trying to reduce their social media use. And I say 2 hours a day or less. Now, there are some disagreements. Some people say as little as 30 minutes. And the Surgeon General says no more than 3 hours, but I think a safe limit that I prefer is 2 hours.
But Dr. Brober, aren't there a lot of parents that are using the cell phone and laptops and tablets as babysitting devices because they like the fact that their children sit in the room quietly, doom scrolling, I guess would be the safest way to put it?
It's true. I mean, that's, to me, lack of parenting. You know, there's a difference between active and passive engagement, right? Active engagement means you're on social media, you're on there for a reason, maybe you're trying to form social connections. And then passive use, which is what you talked about, which is the doom scrolling, the infinite scrolling, the likes, the social comparison, and just sort of sitting there, and it never ends. I think that is more associated with unhealthy use.
A final question before I let you go. Yes or no? Do you have any doubt that these social media apps are dangerous to our children?
I think they are dangerous.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight on Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. We hope you have a wonderful Wednesday night.